Brilliant. So yeah, this is fun. This is really fun for me. I'm really touched to be up here and to be able to share some stories with you. And the first one I've got, funnily enough, the word seaweed written at the top of my piece of paper, and there's a specific reason for that. So before we start going into the presentation and me showing you some facts in a structured way, I want to show you one of my favorite facts about Studio 2, and it references science and sound. So these curtains were originally filled with seaweed. The reason for that was that seaweed regulates humidity in an environment, and in turn that regulation would regulate the travel of sound waves through the air. So it was a very functional thing to do, and really interesting when you think about it. But seaweed is also a fire hazard, so that situation had to be changed, and it's now full of sort of more baffling material, if you like. So, but that's just, you know, one little stop on our innovation story, and it's a nice one to set the scene with. So yeah, just going to pick up the clicker and figure out which way is which, if you don't mind. Is that backwards? I think that's backwards. Okay, it's going to be forwards. Great. So I'm going to take you back through history and start setting the scene about innovation and music and some of the incredible stories that have happened within our four walls to help you look with our other brilliant speakers and yourselves forward a bit later. So the first thing to do, we thought a nice way to start would be to go back 50 years, seeing as the theme is 50. Now, that takes us to 1973. If you want to check my maths, you can. Feel free to call me out, but let's stay with 1973 anyway, because it was a fantastic year for our story here at Abbey Road. You probably recognize the album cover on your left and the band then on your right. Very significant first stop for us. 1973 was when Dark Side of the Moon was released by Pink Floyd, and that was one of the first and probably the most famous quadraphonic recording. So the sort of one of the beginnings of immersive audio as we know it. And some people also say that Dark Side, many people say, is the best recorded and mixed sounding album ever. So there are 2 points of references for us there. Is that it was an amazing year for the studios to hold Floyd doing that. And also what you're seeing is the desk that they mix it on, which is a TG12345 series of consoles, similar to the one in the corner over there. Why that's a nice part of the story for us is because those desks were made by our off-site team in Hayes, part of the Red team, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. And it was the first instance, or one of the first instances, of solid state consoles. Everything before that was tube consoles. And that's one stop in the innovation story, is the fact that that album was mixed and recorded on it, and it's heralded as one of the best mixed and recorded albums of all time. And also the fact that Floyd experimented with quadraphonic sound. And the second part of that journey is to tell you a little bit about our approach. We've talked about the TG console, which is also pictured here. And this is actually one of the consoles in Studio 3. We keep one in there. And it's amazing that people can use it, and it's set up with some monitors. I'm told by one of our amazing engineers, John Barrett, that the sound all the way up to 0 is quite clean. But then as soon as you push it past 0, it really sizzles, apparently. That was the way that John explained it. So imagine some sizzle. And that's the TG, and that's made through internal innovation at Abbey Road. But 73 was also a year where we started looking outside as a studios. We wanted to offer the best of both worlds and embrace innovation in the music recording and production space wholeheartedly, and offer people the best of both worlds. So that picture on our left is Studio 3 in 1973 with a Neve console in the room, and that was the first case of ever bringing an outside bit of gear of that stature recording console into the studios. So 73 is an important year for us, starting this best of both worlds approach, which we continue today, but also for the TG console and the Pink Floyd story as well. Really nice way for us to start our little tour. The next slide, it contains 2 references. So I told you about the Red team off-site in Hayes, and another part of the Red team was our internal engineers, those people in the white coats that you can very famously see in these pictures. And Red stands for REDD. Well, those are the letters that I'm saying, but actually those letters stand for Record Engineering Development Department. And they were the in-house team of sort of these amazing engineers who made incredible stuff. One example of which was the TG desk over there, and which we've talked about. Another example is this little gizmo over here, which is called an azimuth coordinator. That was made by Bernard Spate for Rick Wright, the keyboardist in Floyd, to control sound quadrophonically at live gigs. Yeah, exactly. It's really cool, isn't it? So that's another amazing story around the same time, 1973, and another stop in our internal innovation story here at Abbey Road Studios. So that's great. That's 50 years ago. What about if we jump another 50 years before that? Tell you about this in a little sec, but that takes us to 1926. 1923, which was 6 years before the building which you're in now, which is in fact the extension built in the garden, so the deed was acquired in 29, and this extension, which contains studios 1, 2, and 3, was built in 2 years, and the studios opened in 1931. So why is the freehold important? Because it tells you a bit of our story. You're in what was a 9-bedroom townhouse here at number 3 Abbey Road. But really, the funky bit of data for us to think about is the size of the garden. We didn't really know what we were doing back then. The next stop in our story of innovation milestones is that Abbey Road was the first ever purpose-built recording studios complex. So that's an amazing fact for us. And another story in our innovation history, the first one, if you go in sequence, if you like, the gramophone company bought the site because, well, it was a big space and you could build a big studio in it. And inside that studio, you could plonk an orchestra. So if we look at the middle picture, well, the one on the left is nice because it's a picture of the original building. But the middle picture is a picture of Elgar with the London Symphony Orchestra recording the first 2 songs here, Land of Hope and Glory and Pomp and Circumstance, the first march. What's fun about that picture is you can see they built the extension and then they just recreated a live performance. So there's a stage, there's the musicians all dressed up, even some plants thrown in for good measure, and a couple of microphones hanging from the ceiling. So if you imagine that in Studio 1 over there, because we were learning our way around production recording techniques. So that's just another nice thing to consider and how much things have changed since then. It's an important part of our history. And then if you look to your right, this is a very, very important individual in the history of sound, Alan Dower-Blumlein, who created stereophonic recording. He referred to it as binaural sound at that time, but stereophonic is more accurate, and we know it as stereo. That was patented in 1934, I think, and the first recordings were done in this room and in Studio 3 on the same day. So that's another incredible milestone in our innovation history, and you can see the plaque on the outside of the building when you leave. Have a look, it's really lovely to see. Sadly, he was killed in a crash during a test flight in 1942 during the Second World War when they were testing a radar system at 38. So you can only wonder what he might have done with sound if he hadn't been tragically killed. But that's another incredible part of our story and intertwining with an amazing individual who changed our sound world. So, what to next? Some more stops along the way. So on the left is one of my very favorite things. Actually, I love all of these things equally. I'll probably say that at every slide. But what you're looking at is the BTR. BTR stands for British Tape Recorder. Another incredible milestone in our history. We were recording straight to vinyl before that, but recording to tape just opened up the world of editing as we know it, which is now done in a computer, but it opened this up to artists. The BTRs were created by, I'll remember the name in a second, but their story is that one of our engineers visited the site where some AG magnetophone tape recorders were being kept in Germany, which the Allies had discovered at the end of the Second World War, and they took inspiration from those designs and came back and built the BTR. And that's the BTR. I don't know which edition it is, but there are There's 3 in the series, BTR 1, 2, 3. There's 24 BTR 3s made, I think, and only 4 survive, one of which is upstairs in the corridor, which is an amazing thing to see as you're just walking around the building, to see this history lying around. So that's one of my favorite things. But another incredible stop in our history. Where do we go next? I want to get you the name. So it was our engineer, Berth Jones, traveling to Berlin to take that inspiration and then create a BTR series. Next stop on the tour is in the middle. So that is a Red 17, and some of you might have seen that desk on your travels upstairs into Studio 2. If not, have a look. It's at the back of the room. Why is it incredibly important? Because it's what many people say is the blueprint for the modern recording console. It was a tube console, and the Red 17 had, I'm just looking for the date, I think it was 51. And it had 8 channels, 2 spares, and a Telefunken tube pre in the middle. And if you want to hear the sound, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, we're back to Pink Floyd here, the crunch that you hear is sound going through that console, or one of those consoles. So that is very important because it's the first, or the first great tube mixing console which people see as a blueprint for consoles that came after it as we know them. And you can see it upstairs. It's another incredible artifact which you can see in the building. Anything in this building is still very much in use, by the way. So everything you see works and it's used. So that's another nice thing for you to know. If we fast forward to the next editions of it, which the Red 51 was the final one, and the 37 was on the way to that, they basically had more features and more channels, and the 37 and 51s were used by a band called the Beatles, among many others that came through these walls, but famously used by the Beatles in the 60s on all of their records up until Abbey Road and Let It Be. So that's another lovely stop in the story of those consoles. In between those consoles in the date, let me just grab it for you. It was the mid-50s. You're seeing something with a very funky name called the RS56 Curve Bender. And it was the first ever parametric EQ. It's sitting in the corridor, I think, upstairs. And it has these amazing big dials, which were taken from scientific consoles because you had nowhere else to get stuff. You know, there weren't production lines for audio equipment like we know nowadays. And it was the first parametric EQ, and it has some really cool names on it, like, I think sharp and blunt to describe the sound. So that's cool. And then we touched upon the B word, the Beatles. You're sitting in the room where the Fabs and George Martin and his amazing team of engineers changed the world, changed culture, but also changed recording and production forever. They turned the rules upon their head. They pushed equipment to its limits and beyond, and they created new sounds as a result. Part of that story, our next stop, could be towards something called the chorus effect, which I'm sure you all know, phasing and chorus effect. So that was created by Ken Townsend, a legendary engineer, who was working on Revolver, and John Lennon famously didn't like to double track his own vocals. So those lovely double track vocals we know from the Beatles, John Lennon apparently didn't really like doing it all the time. So one day he said to Ken, can you figure something out? And Townsend saw these output heads from a Studer tape machine and thought, I've got an extra output head, quirk of technology leading to musical innovation. An extra output head, what could I do with it? I could route it. And if I route that output head, which is 1.5 inches away from the other output head, into a BTR2 tape machine, there'll be a little bit of a delay, but I could also control that delay using a very-speed oscillation device. And that way I could backwards and push forwards and play with the sound and where it's at. So that was the creation of the chorus effect, ADT, automatic double tracking, and born out of a necessity to innovate, to come up with a solution, but using a quirk of equipment design as well. So lovely part of the story. Where do we go next? We're asking each other. So that is a picture of the Red console evolutions that I told you about. I believe that's I think that's a 17 on the right, and
I've caught myself out on the left, so forgive me, but we can come back to it. Here you are seeing the story of Abbey Road next to Paul with the TG console, because Abbey Road was partly recorded, was mixed on a TG console, and we just thought we'd show you some lovely pictures of the Beatles at these desks. That's the red desk over there. Oh, wow, we skipped past, before I tell you about Abbey Road Red, we skipped past a few parts of our story. You know what, we haven't. I've just had so much fun, it's gone really quickly. I think I'm keeping to time as well, which you're probably all happy about. We've got 5 minutes to tell you the end of the story. And for us, that brings us to now. So that brings us to, well, what are we doing at Abbey Road Studios to acknowledge this incredible history of innovation and to think, well, how do we look forward? How do we look outside? So some of the amazing initiatives, I'm very honored and lucky to say with my teammates here, one of them is Abbey Road Red, which is our music technology incubation program. We decided that we would help founders of companies that we were observing outside of the building. We decided we would try and help them because we were seeing that they had these brilliant ideas, but they were getting stuck. They didn't understand how to get past an issue or how to meet the right person to do something or what an artist or label might really want from their interesting idea. So we created the incubation program to look outside and help people launch universally adopted technologies into the music business in the same way that we've seen our on-site teams do it in the last 15 minutes and 92 plus years as well. So Abbey Road Red, where are we with our incubation program? We are 19 startups in. The startups have collectively raised $90 million between them and have a valuation collectively of $350 million. And our cohort spans the value chain from creation to reproduction and everything in between. You can see some of the names, and absolutely delighted and honored to say that Rachel is here, CEO of Darcy, on our current program, which is absolutely awesome. It's an assistive composition platform and yeah, an example of some of the incredible technologies that we're working with and that we're lucky to find an opportunity to help. And you'll hear more from Rachel about what they're doing later. Another company currently on our platform, our medical playlist company, MediMusic, who are using algorithms, proprietary algorithms and data to help recommend music playlists, which will help one relax, help alleviate symptoms of pain and also anxiety. And they're deploying that in medical settings at the moment and doing POCs. And an alum that's just rolled off, a metaverse platform called Zone, is about to launch a major artist activation next week. So we're really pleased to say this stuff and talk about the startups that we work with at Abbey Road Red. What else are we doing at the studios alongside Red? Our other initiatives include our audio products department. So within our audio products department, we have key partnerships with Waves for plugins, Chandler to recreate classic gear like the microphone you're seeing in the middle so that we can all buy into it, and the sound. And also an amazing partnership with Spitfire Audio as well to release packs of instrument samples that have been recorded in these rooms, which sound absolutely amazing. So that's some of the amazing things that are coming out of our audio products department. Another thing is the Abbey Road Institute, launched to help train the next generation of engineers and producers. It's a global initiative. Our immersive mix stage, which was built into the garden of number 5, which is the next door building to this one, is a fully spec'd, absolute state-of-the-art immersive mix suite. So with the launch of that a few years ago, we could suddenly do end-to-end film recording within the studios, from recording scores in here, in Studio 1, Studio 3, doing overdubs in our smaller rooms, but then taking it to a fully immersive mix and mastering it in our Atmos-equipped rooms as well, which were recently launched too. To give you an example of some of the music mixes that we've done in Atmos, releases from Sam Fender, Florence and the Machine, Lana Del Rey, mastering, FKJ and Howard Shaw, and some of the films done in the immersive mix suite, our mix stage, were Downton Abbey, and Dumbo, and Tar as well more recently. I remember Dumbo was one of the earlier ones, so that's quite fun to hear about. So that's our innovation story, and it also means, innovation to us means making things accessible. So we have an online set of digital services like online mixing and mastering, which are affordable, and it doesn't reduce quality for you if you buy into them, because our amazing engineers are working on your music. It's just done remotely. And a final piece of our amazing innovation story alongside that, and this extension into the digital world for us, was the acquisition of Audio Movers, which is a high quality one-way streaming protocol where you can take a mix straight out from your DAW and stream it into someone else's DAW, and at extremely high quality. So you can do live mixing and talk about where you're taking music and send stuff backwards and forwards with your collaborators. So for us, that was a huge move. The acquisition was a couple of years ago and helps us extend into the digital space. And on the left there, you're seeing a picture of our mix stage, which I talked about, the immersive mixing suite. So with that, I hope I set the scene well for you. I hope that together, and from what we hear next, we can start imagining what the next 50 years might look like. And I'm looking forward to sharing the rest of the afternoon with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Cheers.